Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. Allahumma aftah ilayna hikmatak wanshur alayna rahmatak ya dhal jalali wal ikram wa na'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Okay, we're all here, so inshallah let's proceed. So he's going to talk about Wadifatul Qalb. This is a very interesting chapter. I'm going to take it as slow as I can to explain each portion. And just stop me if you have any questions, because now he's getting a bit more technical. This is Ghazali style. He takes each step at a time, and this is also his wisdom, his hikmah in teaching, which is that you never give someone the whole pitcher of water to quench their thirst. Give them small bits at a time, and then when they want the next pitcher is when you give them the next portion, so that it is easily digestible. So he's going to get a bit more technical, and he's now going to introduce another technical term here, and these are the spies, the hawasis. So he says, "I'lam anna shahwata wal ghadaba khadimani lin nafs جاذبان يحفظان أمر الطعام والشراب والنكاح لعمل الحواس." Know that the shahwa and the ghadab are servants of the soul. They are fetching servants, and they are charged with preserving the order of food, of drink, of copulation to the labor of the senses, to fulfill the senses, the sense of hunger, the sense of thirst that the body requires, the copulation that is required by the body for the longevity of the species. The shahwa and the ghadab are fetching servants of the soul to fulfill those elements. So, from the get-go, Ghazali is saying that these are not negative attributes in and of themselves. They are positive attributes if they are kept within the boundaries of their positivity. And so this goes back contingently to the question that we ask about the problem of good and evil. So in other theologies, like we said, they say that mankind is created inherently evil. Islam argues against that. We say no, mankind is not inherently created evil. Mankind is created inherently good. And this is the fitrah, the nature with which mankind has been created, is good. It's always inclined towards good. And evil, therefore, is a capitulation, because we've been sent to the lowest of the low. Our job is to rise up, is to rise higher, is to rise above that. So choice is towards the good. And that means that mankind has been created good. And that also means, by extension, all the aspects and compositions of the human being are created for good. The body has been created for a good, for a purpose. And all these components, the hunger, the anger, the desires, these are all components of good. They have a certain role to play, as Ghazali said. So in this regard, they are the fetching servants of the soul, because the soul needs the body to survive. Without the body, the soul cannot exist in this world. And so for that purpose, the desire and the anger, they serve the body in the positive aspects to ensure that, number one, the body is kept in a mode of survival. So the food, the hunger, the copulation, all these are satisfied by these two faculties. ثم النفس خادم الحواس شبكة العقل وجواسيسه. Thereafter, the soul is a servant of the senses. I'll explain how that works. As a net for the intellect and its spies. So the soul plays this central role in between. The anger and the shahwa are servants of the soul. And the soul also serves the senses in terms of being a net for receiving what the senses have sensed, what they've acquired of this world. It acts as a net for capturing everything so that the intellect can make use of it. يُبْصِرُهَا صَنْعُ الْبَارِ جَلَّتْ قُدْرَتُهُ. It is with these spies that the Akal is able to see. And here the Basar here is not just the nazar. It includes all the senses. So the Basar also includes the hearing and the tasting and the smelling, the overall interaction with this world. Basar is with regards to the outward physical sight or perception. And as perception is actually the perfect word for that. That's Basar, perception. Baseera is with regards to the inward conception. So conceptualization is inward, and that's when in the English language you get this dynamic between tuition, which is outward learning, and intuition, which is an inward sort of a knowledge, right? You have sight, which is outward, and then you have insight, which is inward. You have telligent, which is what the brain computes, and then you have intelligent, which is now the intellect, the intelligence, the inward aspect. So it is through these spies, the jawasis, that it's able to comprehend the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These spies are the senses, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, the skin, and these are the 5 primary senses, and then there are the other senses as well that go along with it. ثُمَّ الْحَوَاسِ خَادِمُ الْعَقْلِ. These senses are then servants of the Akal, of the intellect. وَهُوَ لِلْقَلْبِ سِرَاجٌ وَشَمْعَةٌ يُبْصِرُ بِنُورِهِ الْحَدْرَةَ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ. And to the heart, the Akal is a lamp, it's a siraj, and a candle, sham'a. And with it, it is able to see the nur, the light of this divine presence. This is where I would usually branch off into Al-Ghazali's Mishkat al-Anwar, because in the Mishkat he explains that the ayah in Surah An-Nur, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, mathalu nurihi ka mishkat fiha misbah. That misbah, Ghazali says, is the lamp of the intellect. This is the lamp with which the heart can see the creation of Allah. It is through the intellect's comprehension, through the intellect's analysis, that the heart can comprehend reality. So the senses serve the intellect, and the intellect serves the heart. لأن الجنة وهي نصيب الجوف أو الفرج محترقة في جانب تلك الجنة. The Jannah, the pleasure that the senses they delight in, pales in comparison. It's completely insignificant. In fact, it is displeased when compared to the other Jannah that the heart delights in. The heart does not delight in the pleasures of this world, in the pleasures of the senses. The heart delights in the pleasures of paradise, of true Jannah. And it's one of the reasons why, if you really pay attention to your indulgences, you will often find that after you have indulged yourself, when that moment of satisfaction is past, you actually feel guilty and depressed. It's happened, it happens to everyone, it happens to me, it happens to you, it happens to everyone. When you've passed that moment of indulgence, when you went out and bought the thing that you really desired, once you've explored every aspect of it, you no longer find pleasure in it. It's a bygone. When you see that beautiful, that lovely smelling food on the table, exotic dishes you've never seen before, and you start feeding, once the taste has passed and the stomach is full and you can't eat anymore, people often feel depressed and they feel guilty for having done that. They feel like, I feel like a pig, So the heart, and that's the heart that's speaking, because the heart does not indulge in these, it doesn't like these pleasures. These pleasures are for bodily aspects only. The soul feels it because we are integrated with the body, but the heart does not delight in it. The heart is content with the bare minimum because its main focus, as Ghazali says, is ma'rifatullah. Is there any question up until there?
What did you mean about the spies? You said the spies, the nose, the eyes, the five senses. What do you mean by spies?
Spies as in the gatherers of information. So in the Arabic language, if you look at the definition of jasus from the root word jassa, this is very interesting because it will also help you understand the hadith of Tamim ud-Dari. When they see that beast, and they ask the beast, why, they say, Wailuki ma anti, what are you? And it says, Anal jassasa. The word jassa actually means to probe, like to touch. And so this is what the senses do. They keep probing in real time. They keep probing the environment. Like your eyes are always moving about. They're always gathering information. So they are like spies, and then these spies report to the brain, to the Akal. They report to the brain and then to the Akal. He's going to explain that, inshallah.
What was the difference between Basar and Baseera?
Basar is the outward eye. It's the outward sight. So the best translation you could give it is sight, Basar. And then Baseera is insight. It's that to see with the inward eye. And then earlier on he explained
there's something about conception and perception.
Yes, so perception is what your outward senses acquire. That's your perceiving reality. That is Basar, that's your sight. And then conception is when you are perceiving it inwardly, or you could even call it introspection. It's an internal element. So it's sort of, you are thinking or you are building the form, the shapes in your mind, but you're actually seeing with the heart now. That mode of comprehending or discernment is the heart that is actually seeing reality, because it understands what the senses do not understand. See, the senses can only see outward reality. The senses cannot see that other world reality. Right? And this is what he said earlier, that it's the heart, and it's from the لأن عالم الأمر عبارة عن شيء من الأشياء لا يكون للمساحة والتقدير طريق إليه. It's we see from the عالم الأمر is where we understand those things that do not occupy space, that are not divisible, that are not quantitative. And the heart, he said, is from عالم الأمر. And so the heart understands that other realm of Amr, right? And so it's the ibara. You're crossing over from this outward world where you're seeing quantity. You cross over, and you don't cross over with your eyes, with your senses. Your senses are limited to this world, but your heart is not. So your heart is the one that crosses over, and it understands that other reality of discernment, of understanding, of meaning. And that's what the poet meant when he said, إِنَّمَا الْكَوْنُ مَعَانِي قَائِمَةٌ بِالصُّوَرِ كُلُّ مَنْ يُدْرِكُ هَذَا كَانَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْإِبْرِ. That the world is meaning erected in form and shape. The meaning is internal, inside. The shape and form is outward. Whoever understands that, whoever recognizes that, is from the people of Ibr. So the Quran always tells you, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. Right? فَاعْتَبِرُوا. Discern, understand, cross over. All you people of Basar. Move beyond the shape and form. A lot of people just look at the Quran and they go through the recitation only. All they're doing is looking at the shape and the form and the sound that it makes. These are all outward elements. The Quran is saying, go inward, understand the meaning. That's where the true reality lies. Not in the recitation. The recitation has its benefits, yeah. But the true fruit, the ocean, is in the meaning. So go inward. فَاعْتَبِرُوا. Look, do the ibar. All you people who can see, who have this sight. And so even sight in this case, the basar is different from nadar. Because nadar is looking And there's a difference between looking and seeing. Because you can look at something, but you're not actually getting anything from that. But when you're seeing, you're actually, drawing that information. You're taking it inside. So that's Basar. That's also from that saying of Nabi's, الدنيا مُعْبِرَةٌ فَاعْتَبِرُوهَا وَلَا تَعْمِرُوهَا. That the world is it's a bridge, so cross over it. Don't stagnate, don't build on it. Because you get fixated on the signs. People don't move beyond the signs. Here's one interesting thing about people who say, oh, we're students of eschatology, right? This is their stupidity. And I'm sorry to say that, but this is their idiocracy in it. They look at the signs and they get fascinated by the signs. Oh, Dajjal, oh, Gog and Magog. Yeah, we can all see the signs. Everyone's looking at the same signs. Some people recognize them, some don't. Those who recognize them, you have to move on to understanding where do the signs lead, right? If you stay and fixate on the signs, you're never going to go anywhere. You just keep going round and round in circles, looking at the same sign, hoping to get different information from it. But then those who actually do ibar, they tend to move further, because what's a sign? A sign never points to itself. It's a representing meaning. It's pointing to something else. That's what you want to look out for. So the world as a sign is pointing to the Creator. That's where you want to go. That's where you'll find contentment. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in the semantics. And this is beautiful about Ghazali. He's not speaking in semantics. He's giving you universals. Like he's giving you that universal allegory that we looked at. You can apply that and you understand what you need to understand without having to dissect the human body in all the cellular forms to understand that the heart is in charge and the Akal does this and the Shahwa does that. It's a universal. Once you understand that, you can apply it to any particular. So he says, ثُمَّ الْأَقْلُ خَادِمُ الْقَلْبِ. The Akal is a servant of the heart. وَالْقَلْبُ مَخْلُوقٌ لِنَظْرِ جَمَالِ الْحَضْرَةِ الْإِلَهِيَةِ. The heart was only created to see, to contemplate, to reflect, to understand the beauty of this divine presence. That's all that the heart was meant to do. And so when you see the creation of Allah, you can only praise Allah if your heart is sound. Qalbun salim. If your heart is sound, then you'll only praise Allah. People who look out and they start cursing nature and they start cursing, the way people have behaved, all this nonsense about 2020, death to 2020, and 2020 is this, and it was the worst year in human. No, why are you cursing time? Time is a creation of Allah. Whatever happened in 2020 was not the doing of 2020. That's just a number. It was your doing, right? It was human beings who caused all this mayhem and fitna. But you see the ignorance of these people who don't have sound hearts. They'll never blame themselves. They will always blame something else. Because the heart always seeks a means to cleanse itself. So a heart that's sincere will always look to see, what am I doing wrong? It doesn't matter what he's doing to me or what she did. What did I do wrong? Fix that, because I have to find my own contentment. My contentment's not going to come from them, or it's not going to come if the weather is good, if it's sunny all day, right? That's not where my contentment is going to come from. But these people will always blame something else. And the attitude and the arrogance with which they do it is the same arrogance that Iblis had, right? It was just, I'm better than him. You created me. I'm superior to him. Why should I be the one to lower myself? Right? And then when he's shown his fault, you led me astray. It's your fault. It's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. This is how people are behaving. The heart was created only to see and contemplate and reflect the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that when you see that it's raining, you say, Subhanallah. He has sent down rain as a mercy and a kindness unto you. When you see something taking place somewhere else, you accept it as Allah's doing, and you accept that there is hikmah in Him doing it. It might seem a disaster to you, but He's doing it for a reason you don't really understand. And another issue here also lies in how they actually perceive evil. See, these people, their definition of evil includes tornadoes and earthquakes and tsunamis. That's all evil. And I'm not kidding. You look at this, you look it up. Look at how they define evil. They have a special category called natural evil or evil in nature or something of the sort. They call that evil. Allah's Majesty, when Allah is sending His command to the earth to do A, B, C, D, they call that evil. Subhanallah. فَمَنْ اجْتَهَدَ فِي هَذِهِ السُّنَعَةُ فَهُوَ عَبْدٌ حَقٌّ. So whosoever embarks on this ijtihad, this struggle, the struggle of this craftsmanship, this procedure, this way of cleansing itself, فَهُوَ عَبْدٌ حَقٌّ. This is the true abd, this is the true servant of Allah. مِنْ غِلْمَانِ الْحَضْرَةِ. From the youthfulness of His presence. كما قال سبحانه وتعالى وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. And I did not create the jinn or mankind except but to serve me and to worship me. In Surah Al-Dhariyah. And he gives a small explanation here. وَمَعْنَاهُ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْقَلْبِ. Meaning we created the heart. وَأَعْطَيْنَاهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْعَسْكَرِ. And we gave it a dominion and soldiers and troops. وَجَعَلْنَا النَّفْسَ مَرْكَبَهُ. And we gave it the soul. We placed the soul as its beast, as its rider. Because the king needs his beast, he needs his steed to lead the troops in battle. حَتَّى يُسَافِرُ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ عَالَمَ التُّرَابِ إِلَى أَعْلَى عِلِّيِّينَ. Until it can journey from this world of turab, of soil and dirt and matter and material, to the highest of the high. This is the spiritual ascension of man. This is your purpose of being sent to the lowest, not to indulge in the lowest, but you've been sent here so that you can rise back up. Any questions still there?
That and you kept on alluding to it in your previous part of it, where basically the inward realities are reflecting the outward realities.
Mm-hmm.
And if our inward reality individually is corrupted,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see that communally, outwardly.
Oh yeah.
The politician's fault is my fault because my heart, I have lost reins of my heart, and therefore I lost reins of my body. And so everything that we see around us really is, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ, from what the hands have wrought. And so that's just that's a reflection, and subhanAllah, it's just really, it's really refreshing and life-giving discussions of everything.
MashaAllah, subhanAllah. That's good. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, it's all if you really want to think about it, it's people when we complain and say things are wrong, everything is wrong, everything is a mess. No, you're a mess, There's something wrong with you. Remember Ismail's wife and then his second wife. Same circumstances, same hardships, same environment, same everything outward. What was different? It was the hal, it was the inward reality of the first one compared to the second wife. That the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam had to tell his son, get rid of that one. And then come back later and say, keep this one, she's a keeper. Same hal, same circumstances, different hal. Right. If more and more people looked at reality in that way, things would definitely change. Now, in the Quran, what's interesting is that Allah can refer to the same location as Qarya and as Al-Madinah. And they'll be the same location. Qarya has a negative connotation. Medina has a positive connotation. When a city wants to reach its civility, Medina actually comes from two root words. One is actually deen, which is to do with religion. So when the Prophet ﷺ arrived at Yathrib, he changed the name to Medina. Why? Because now civility had come to the city, and that's where the deen actually changes this city of yours, this soul. The deen changes that from being something that's just whatever to something that's of civility, of adab, something that's flourishing inwardly. In Musa and Al-Khidr's allegory, in the first portion of the third journey that Musa and Al-Khidr make to the city, in that ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it qarya. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm aware. قرية أهلكناها فجاءها بأسنا بياتا أو هم قائمون فما كان. There's a few ayat like that.
No. I'm talking about the ayah in Suratul Kahf. After Musa and Al-Khidr, they go on the ship, and then they go to the boy. He kills the boy. فانطلق حتى إذا أتيا أهل قرية استطعما. They came to a town, to a city, and its people behaved in such and such a way. They didn't even give them food. They were so inhospitable. He calls them qarya. But then later on, when he is explaining to him, to Musa, that I'm going to explain to you why I did what I did, he says, وَأَمَّا الْجِدَارُ فَكَانَ لِغُلَمَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. There were two orphans living in the Medina, in the city. And he calls it that because وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا, because their father was a righteous person. What makes a city a city? It's the civility. It's not the buildings. It's not the infrastructure. You can have your electricity poles and everything with the drainage systems, everything, mashallah, cribs, carpeted roads, green lawns, everything beautiful outwardly. But the people are immoral. The people are perverted. The people only, they indulge, they walk around the street naked. That doesn't make civility. It's the purified soul inside that makes the city a civilized nation. And that's why the Prophet changed Yathrib to Medina, because now the deen is what gives you civility. It's the way of life. If you follow that way of life, then you're on the right path. You're on the path of civility.
You know, Sidi, something interesting that I was considering with regards to the heart, right? This knowledge is actually, now it's very scarce, but in very developed communities and societies, this was the norm where this discussion would happen. And in fact, people would have these discussions, would be the most well compensated and the most well regarded in such a healthy civilization, whether you say Muslim civilization or you say, in ancient Rome, ancient Greek, ancient Egypt, ancient Timbuktu, ancient wherever, it was always regarded as that. So I really find it in some ways depressing and in other ways eye-opening that this is the situation,
Yeah, I mean, generally, if you look at it, every civilization, they say that no civilization ever crumbled, but that it betrayed itself from within. And that doesn't just relate to like the government having spies and stuff. It actually refers to the state of the civilization itself. In other words, like the Prophet ﷺ said with regards to Ya'juj and Ma'juj in the dream he had, when he woke up and said, وَيْلٌ لِلْعَرَبِ مِنْ شَرٍ قَدْ اقْتَرَبَ. And then Zainab, his wife, asked him, are we also going to be destroyed when there are righteous people amongst us? She was referring to the Arabs, we the Arabs, and he said, Naam. When immorality prevails, in other words, and in his last khutbah, he said, cling to Quran and Sunnah. Cling to this deen and you'll be fine. The Sahaba asked him, how are we going to survive those days of fitna? And he said, cling to this. So long as you adhere to that, you'll be fine. But the moment you start giving it up and you fall to your own whims and desires and wishes and all that, then you're getting into a mode of destroying yourselves. Because what's going to prevail from there? It's that immorality is going to start prevailing from there. And it doesn't really matter, because religion will help guide you along the right way. Even though as a human being you have been created with a fitrah that's got what's known in philosophy as cardinal virtues, which he's going to talk about in the next chapter. The courage, perseverance, prudence, wisdom, right, justice. These are things that are inherent in the human being. But they have to be guided, they have to be flourished. So religion does that. But even when you look at all these other civilizations which didn't have this religion, and by the way, the Quran says it, to every nation we sent a messenger. So this idea that there were civilizations that just flourished out of the blues without religion, that doesn't exist. Every civilization at its core, at its root, at its origin had a messenger. That means it had guidance from Allah. It's when the people started moving away from that they ended up facing their destruction. And the Muslim civilization is the same thing. There are Muslims in the world, but there's no Muslim civilization. Right? What happened to the Ottomans with all their glory? When they started off, they were ferocious in their deen. They didn't compromise for anything. The Ottomans did a lot, the way they upheld the religion, they upheld the one of the most dominant things that keeps a city alive is its market system. They upheld the free market system. They made sure there was no riba in the market system. And then afterwards, what happened? They started bringing in all these other things from the West, the banking systems and everything. And they faced their loss eventually. What destroyed them? Muslims like blaming the kuffar for everything. Oh, kuffar this, kuffar that, the kuffar did to us. Kuffar didn't do anything to you, bro. You're the one who abandoned the Quran. And then the same Muslim will argue, yeah, but the kuffar made us abandon the Quran. No, you're the one who abandoned the Quran. You abandoned the Sunnah. You reduced your Prophet's guidance to a set of rules and dogmas, and you reduce your religion to fatwa. What do you expect? So look at the state that we are in today. I mean, they say close the masjid, we close the masjid. They say 6 feet apart Jamaat, we do 6 feet apart Jamaat. It's ridiculous how we behave. I went to the masjid after almost a year because I was on the road. And I stopped for Dhuhr because it was Dhuhr, so I said I'm just going to pray Dhuhr and Asr together. And the Jamaat had not yet started yet, and because I was in a hurry, I decided to just pray my own. And I went into the masjid, and there's people there who are, first of all, sitting 6 feet apart, and each of them has a piece of paper on the floor, on top of the carpet, on which they're doing their sajda, with their masks on, which was comical in and of itself. But then I had to do it as well because that was the regulation. They were not going to let me pray otherwise. And there's a huge dumpster outside filled with this paper. Huge dumpster full of paper that people just come, they do their sajda on, and then they go and throw it outside in the bin with no thought of a repercussion as to how much of that is being wasted. I mean, I don't know if it's really strange how we've ended up being. I mean, our predecessors would never behave like this. Never behave like this. It's just amazing. Anyway, so Imam Al-Ghazali says from that point, فَإِذَا أَرَادَ أَن يُؤَدِّي حَقَّ هَذِهِ النِّعْمَةِ. So if the heart wants to fulfill its right for this ni'mah of rising to the spiritual heights, جَلَسَ مِثْلَ السُّلْطَانِ فِي صَدْرِ مَمْلَكَتِهِ. All it has to do is sit like a king amidst its dominion. That's all it has to do. All the heart has to do is recognize that I am in charge of this body. I am in charge of its emotions. I am in charge of its intellections and its whims and desires. They don't control me. I control them. That's all that the king has to do. And وَجَعَلَ الْحَضْرَةَ الْإِلَهِيَّةَ قِبْلَتُهُ وَمَقْصِدُهُ. It has to place this divine presence as its qibla, its direction, and its maqsad, its goal and its objective. وَجَعَلَ الْآخِرَةَ وَطَنَهُ وَقَرَارَهُ. It has to make the Akhirah its abode and its resolution. In other words, all its thoughts should be bent towards the Akhirah. Everything that it does, every command, every amr that it issues to the body, do this and do that, has to be geared towards a cultivation of its Akhirah. Now, this is where the interesting element comes in, because we say that civilization comes from culture, and culture comes from cultivation, and cultivation comes from the thinking, the thought process, because you think about how you're going to cultivate your external aspect. Now, where are the thoughts defined from? What influences the thoughts? It's the language. The language you speak and you think in will define your thoughts, and that will define how you perceive the world, your world view. How do you understand your world view? How do you understand your reality? What's your world view? That will then result in how you cultivate it. If you just look at the world as a gold mine or a cash cow, the way most people do, then that's how they're going to cultivate it. They'll dig down to the depths, take all the shiny stuff, and then leave a big empty hole sitting right there. They'll cut off the entire forest, turn all the trees into whatever they want to turn it into, and then leave an empty barren land. They'll make their plastics and all their electronics, and then when they no longer feel the need for it, the desire is gone, right? You've already moved past it's a nice thing, and you've already moved past that. Then you throw it in the bin. It goes and sits in a dump somewhere. It pollutes the rivers, the seas. Look at the world that's being cultivated. It's because that's the language they speak. They speak the materialist language. They speak the consumerist language, the capitalist language. They speak that ideology. They don't speak the religious language. When I'm saying speak language, I'm not talking about the semantic language. I'm not talking about English or Arabic or Urdu or that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's a semantic form. I'm talking about the meaning. What language do you speak in here, up here? That's the language I'm talking about. When you speak the Quran's language, you have a different projection of what the world is like, what's reality like. And then you cultivate it accordingly. You wouldn't dare cut down a tree, because you would recognize that that is a living being that Allah has created. You wouldn't dare torture animals the way they torture animals for the sake of science and progress. You wouldn't dare do that, because that's a creature of Allah. The kindness and the jamal of your heart will be reflected unto the world. You will cultivate it accordingly. And since the Quran speaks the language of Akhirah, the Quran is a constant reminder that you are going to return to that other world that you came from, that Akhirah. Akhirah doesn't just mean last. This is one big mistake that people do when they think about Akhirah. They only think about, because this is a world of continuum, right? It's got a progression that is algorithmic, so one thing leading to another, and so time is perceived as something that's linear. So this will continue in a linear plane, and then this will end, and then Akhirah will begin. No, that's not how it works. Akhirah is existent at the same time that this world is existent. Akhirah just means other, the other world, right? Otherworldly. That's what Akhirah means. It's existent while you're existent. You're just not in that location yet. You're in this location in time. So your cultivation in real time should be geared towards the other and not towards this. You would focus more on that. If you want that sa'ada, you have to sit like a king in your dominion, control yourself, regulate your body. You've been given the procedure, the rules, the guidelines, everything is there. You have the entire legislation with which you can govern. Turn your focus and make your direction the divine presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then cultivate your thoughts and the real world in accordance to that. I hope I didn't confuse anyone on that one point. Is everyone okay on that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any question? No questions? Alif. You had a question, Alif?
Makes sense.
Okay. Anyone else had a question?
I asked you a question.
Sorry, you sent a question. What is stress and anxiety? What is stress and anxiety is caused by someone else's personality being really frustrating on you. Okay, he's gonna mention something in the next chapter where he's going to talk about the three dimensions of the soul, the ghadab, the shahwa, and the akal. He's going to start expanding a little bit on that. So he's going to mention something there, and I'll be able to answer the question from that point, inshallah. Another question. Can you expand on how the Quran speaks the language of the Akhirah? The Quran is always speaking in terms of explaining to the human being that this world that you're looking at is a temporal world. There's always going to be a raja'a, thumma arji'ukum, you will be returned to Him. Now Allah is not a material being. He's not this worldly being. He is not a material God. He is from that world, and so we will return to that world. Now, one of the fundamental things that Surah Al-Kahf starts off with is to lay this out from the very beginning, because as we approach the Dajjalic zenith, the paradigm shifts from previous peoples who had an incline of fitrah. Previous peoples always thought about things in a spiritual way, in an otherworldly way. They always felt like animals had spirits, the world had a spirit, that there was a spiritual. In many cases they were misguided because a lot of it is supposition. And the deen arrives at these intervals throughout human history to bring those suppositions back on track. Yes, there is an other world out there, but this is how you would understand it. So previous people had this disposition, and it's a fitrah thing to be disposed towards an otherworldly thing. So children are the best to understand human nature. If you want to understand human nature, if you're studying psychology and you want to understand human nature at its purest, children are the best to observe. Children are very fascinated with otherworldly things, with the supernatural. They're very fascinated with things that are not, because they're not that interested in this world. Their heart is still pure. It's over time, slowly, that they start getting entrained into the artifacts and the physical objects, and they become clingy to the physical objects. So the fitrah is always inclined towards that spiritual plane. Now, that's where we came from, and that's where we will return to. So in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah makes this clear distinction from the very beginning that as we approach this Dajjalic zenith, which is hoping to turn this thing upside down, and these are the two signs that are mentioned in the hadith of Jibril. The slave woman giving birth to her mistress. Some scholars have interpreted that as an upset of the social order, where the natural order status of the social order that Allah has ordained, or that previous civilizations have all followed, is now being turned upside down. It's all haywire. And the second sign is people, the barefooted shepherds competing in the construction of tall buildings. Some scholars have interpreted that as a competition in material affiliations, a material competition. This upset of social order also refers to an upset of the natural order, where previous civilizations looked at quality over quantity, spirit over material, mind over matter. They always focused on, gave regard to the unseen element over the seen element. And now towards this age, it's flipped around. Material is given preference over spiritual. Spiritual is seen as fiction, is seen as fantasy, myth, legend, imaginative. People are also called insane, whims. It's whimsical. The material, factual, empirical truth is all that matters to them. They believe that all knowledge is only derived from the senses only, that the other knowledge doesn't come to us. There's no such thing as spiritual knowledge. There's no such thing as revealed knowledge. So in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Everything in this ard, in this physical ard, we have placed as an adornment, so that we can see and test which of them is ahsanu amala, the best in action, not just in the action, the best in the action. It's the ihsan, it's the spiritual element. And the Prophet defines ihsan as an ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tara. You worship, serve Him as though you can see Him. If you can't see Him, know that He can see you. This is a maqam of spirituality. It's otherworldly. In Surah Al-A'raf, ayah number 172, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدُهُمْ. Ihsan is a maqam of mushahada. It is witnessing by the heart. Knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not book knowledge. It's ilm al-mushahada. It's witnessed by the heart. So He gathered all of the progeny of Adam and He made them testify. عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ, on themselves. أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ, am I not your Lord? قَالُوا بَلَا شَهِدْنَا, and they all testified. Indeed, we are in testimony. And He says, أَن تَقُولُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِنَّا كُنَّا أَنْ هَذَا غَافِلِينَ, lest you say on the day of judgment that of this we were unaware. We didn't know about this. Well, if you actually ask yourself, do you remember doing that? I don't remember doing that. And nobody remembers doing that. That's why we have atheists who don't believe in God. They don't remember doing that. And yet Allah is saying, you did that. You did testify. Well, that testimony is an a priori knowledge. It's in your fitrah. It's something that you testified in a world where you existed purely as a soul and a heart. You didn't have a bodily existence. And then you entered into this world and that testimony was forgotten. Ibn Abbas said, Nasiya al-insan ahd Allah, fasumiya al-insan. Insan was called insan because he forgot. Nasiya, it's from the same root. Insan comes from the root of nasiya. He forgot. It's a forgetfulness. We forgot that we made this testimony. So we forgot this. So the Quran arrives as a dhikr, as a reminder, to constantly remind you, don't forget where you came from, because you're going to go back there. Don't forget, you're going to be returned there, that state that you were in the presence of your Lord. This language, this is the language that the Quran constantly employs. It's a constant reminder to the human being that you came from Him and you're going to go back to Him. This is the language that the ulama, the scholars of our religion, always spoke. They always recognize, and this goes deeper into the aspect of being, of existence. When you now become consciously aware of your own existence, that you are aware of every breath, and in every breath you are conscious that you do not belong here. You are always thinking about that other world. So now the language has actually penetrated your heart, so that your thoughts are inclined towards that other world, that Akhirah. This is the language of the Quran. I hope that answered your question.
I got a question. Allah says, like, when you warn them, they're not going to believe. So, what is your advice on, like, should you even mention, like, even the invitation or even talking about anything remotely related to Islam or Allah? Like, what is your advice how to deal with the kuffar and, like, people, atheists and Christians and all that?
With da'wah, it's very sensitive, because in like what you mentioned in that ayah, in a lot of other places of the Quran, Allah says just leave them alone. Don't bother with them. Even in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah says that to Nabi Muhammad regarding that this particular point. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ إِن لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. Are you going to kill yourself over constantly grieving over them if they don't believe in your message or out of sorrow? Just leave them. Let them. And then further along in Surah Al-Kahf, he also says it again. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants to believe, let him believe. Whoever doesn't want to believe, let him be. Let him choose disbelief. But on the other hand, it's also important that you constantly attempt to remind them. And this is what the Prophet did. Whatever opportunity he got, he tried to engage in conversation. People came to him to try and debate and to embarrass him, which they never succeeded in. He was articulate in that way, but one beautiful thing about the Prophet's attributes, his qualities, was that his intelligence was not book intelligence. His intelligence was of a much higher level, in that he would apply Basar in the outward perception of reality, but he would really apply Baseera in understanding who he's dealing with. And he was a very good judge of character. It was easy for him to just know who he's dealing with and whether or not he should even waste his time on them. Imam Ali was similar in that way. Imam Ali said, they asked him, how would you know a person? How would you come to know someone? Imam Ali said, as soon as he opens his mouth, I'll know him. In other words, as soon as they start speaking, I'll know them. If they don't open their mouth, it might take me a couple of hours, or it might take me a day to come to know who they really are. In other words, a lot of people who you will deal with, you can just know from their speech whether or not you want to even answer them or respond to them or talk to them, try and reason with them. Because a lot of them are defiant from the very beginning. They're not coming to you to debate you because they're looking for the truth. They're trying to debate you because they want to win the debate. I'll give you a good example. And that's with regards to what's happened recently with Sheikh Hassan Ali and his whole crusade on Instagram regarding something that Sheikh Imran said in a lecture. Now, I'm not a Sheikh Imran defender, right? I'm his student, and whatever he says is his opinion, because I'm going to do my own objective study, so I'm not going to comment on that, and I'm not going to stand and defend him. But when I asked him that, this guy has created so much turbulence with his Instagram videos, he's calling you a kafir, he's doing A, B, C, D, I don't know, what did you do to the guy? And Sheikh Imran told me that I'm not going to respond to him because he's not ready to listen. He wants to debate with me academically, but he's not ready to listen to my argument. So I'm not going to waste my time with him because there's no point. We're just going to get into an argument and it's going to accelerate. See, if the other person's not willing to understand, then you just have to leave them to the mercy of Allah. There's nothing else to it. A lot of the Muslims during the Prophet's time, even though in the early stages a lot of them were in opposition, they actually listened to what the Prophet was saying. And they were in this state of questioning. He's saying some really interesting things. Like Omar, even though he was very temperamental and he was saying, you know what, I'm going to get rid of this once and for all, he actually listened, and he was willing to at least give the other person a chance to speak and to understand what is their argument. Why are they saying what they're saying? But a lot of people don't want that. They just don't want to listen. So you really can't convince everyone. Convince those who want to be convinced. In other words, guide those who want to be guided. And Allah only guides those who want to be guided. So that's my advice. I would say there's no sense in getting into argumentation and debates with people these days. A lot of them, they just have to figure it out for themselves, because everyone enters this world alone. Your job is to give them the message. If they accept it, well and good for them. If they don't, it's up to them. There's a few very interesting elements here. He's going to talk about the different compartments of the brain. He's going to talk about how the information works between the senses and the brain, and then how the mind. So he's going to talk about a few concepts here that I think needs time to digest. We'll need time to really go through it. So yeah, maybe we can convene back on the next session, and then inshallah we can proceed from there. At least we'll have enough time to cover everything. Inshallah. Let's end there then. سبحانك وبحمدك لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خيرا. الحمد لله.